Well, good morning, Mars Hill. Again, my name is Don Kent, and I shared a story last week, and I am back to share another story with you all this week. Today, our story comes from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 19. Everybody, please give me your very best Luke. Thank you. Our story is from the book of Luke. Now, in the time of Jesus, there lived a man named Zacchaeus. All of my Mars Hill kids, let me hear you shout out, Zacchaeus. Now, Zacchaeus was not liked by many people at all. He was not very popular. He didn't belong in many groups, and he was often left on the outside of many of the social things that happened in town. Have you ever felt left out? Have you ever felt like you didn't belong? Well, the reason nobody liked Zacchaeus because he belonged to a group of people called the tax collectors. Zacchaeus was the chief tax collector. They spent their time finding ways to cheat people, their own people, out of their money. They would collect taxes. They would collect more than what was required. They would keep some for themselves, and that made them rich. And that's why people didn't like Zacchaeus. Today in school, it would be like the lunch people charging you $6 for a lunch that only cost $5, and they keep the extra dollar. You could see why people didn't like Zacchaeus. Well, Jesus had been around for a while now, and people had heard about his awesome teachings and his jaw-dropping miracles. People followed Jesus. Whenever Jesus came to a town, a large group of people would always gather to hear what he had to say. We could say that Jesus was kind of like a celebrity. People always wanted to be near him. When Jesus would walk from here to there, people would always try to get close to Jesus. It'd be like, hey, Jesus, can I get a selfie with you? Hey, Jesus, can I get your autograph? Hey, Jesus, will you sign my fishing boat? Hey, Jesus, bless my baby. Well, one day, Jesus came to a town named Jericho. And as always, a large group of people gathered to see him. Well, Zacchaeus was in Jericho, and he wanted to see Jesus too. He thought, who was this Jesus? Why was he so special? I wonder what was going through Jesus' mind on this particular day. But Zacchaeus could not see Jesus because he was too short. Maybe you had this experience in worship today. If you have somebody super tall standing in front of you, you can't see what is going on. Well, Zacchaeus races to his left. He still can't see Jesus. Zacchaeus races to his right. He still can't get a glimpse of Jesus. Zacchaeus stands on his very tippy toes. Still, no glimpse of Jesus. Then, bam, like a bolt of lightning, it hits Zacchaeus, the tree. Zacchaeus sees this sycamore tree straight ahead, and he says, if I could just run and climb up that tree, maybe I can get a glimpse of Jesus. So Zacchaeus reaches for his inner child like he had done long ago as a kid, and he runs. He runs straight for the tree, and he climbs up the tree. Are you comfortable, Zacchaeus? Let's take one more step there. You're good. So he runs up the tree. The crowd continues to walk as Jesus comes by the tree, he stops. The crowd stops. Everybody was holding their breath. What was Jesus going to do? Was he going to perform another awesome miracle? Was he going to give them another great lesson? Jesus stops right in front of the tree. He stares at the tree and he says, Zacchaeus, hurry, come down. Today I must be a guest in your home. Now, the crowd grumbled and complained when they heard this. Let me hear you guys grumble and complain. The crowd grumbled and complained. But that didn't matter. Actually, the crowd said, he has gone to be the guest in the home of a sinner. He has gone to be the guest in the home of a sinner. Well, that didn't matter to Zacchaeus. It didn't matter to Jesus. In fact, we know the story says that later that day, Zacchaeus says to Jesus, Lord, if I have cheated anyone, I will pay them back 4 times. In fact, here's half my wealth. I give it to the poor. Jesus' interaction with Zacchaeus, who was left out, who did not belong, was made to feel like he did belong. I think when Jesus called Zacchaeus from that tree, he was telling Zacchaeus, you are loved, you matter, and you belong. I think Jesus is telling all of us that today. You are loved. You matter. And you belong. That's right. You belong. As we did last week, we have a few questions that we want to talk about with our neighbors. And today's questions are this: where do you feel like you belong? Where do you feel like you belong? And then when has someone's actions made you feel like you belong? Let's take a few minutes. Let's talk about those with our neighbors. Thank you.
When I was a kid, probably around the age of kindergarten until I was in my college years, every summer, my family, my parents, me and my younger brother, we would go up north to this really nasty dive of a resort for vacation for a week. And of all the lakes, the beautiful lakes and beaches in Michigan, this was not one of the more beautiful lakes and beaches. But we would go to this resort, and it wasn't just the four of us. It was a bit of a family reunion. There were years where there were around 75 of my dad's relatives, my cousins, aunts, and uncles, my dad's cousins, aunts, and uncles, all renting cottages at this gross little resort on this gross little lake up north. And we would spend the week together. And we'd have bonfires, and we would grill out, and we'd play volleyball and bocce ball and go fishing. We'd play putt-putt and ride go-karts. It was, as a kid, it was unbelievable. When I look back, I think, how on earth did I live through that, staying in such conditions? But it was always a blast. And the aunts and uncles who were on this trip, I adored them. I looked up to them. I wanted to be like them. It was always so much fun to spend time with them. And one of the years, I was 13 years old, the summer before my freshman year of high school. It was too cold to go to the beach. And we'd already blown through all of our cash for go-karts and putt-putt and movies and bowling and all of that sort of thing. So in the parking lot in front of the beach at this resort, we were playing this massive family kickball game. Has anybody in this room ever played kickball before? A few of us? You can play this game on any system. It's available for all systems. It transcends all ages and generations. And we were playing this massive family kickball game. And to set the scene a little bit, I'll say that it was somebody's idea to say we should have a grown-ups team and a kids team, and which sounded like fun unless you were kind of in between those two groups. So I was 13, and I was the oldest of all the cousins. And because I loved my aunts and uncles so much, I wanted to be on the grown-ups team. I didn't want to be on the kids team. And after much deliberation and arguing, I had been sentenced to be on the kids' team. What I'll also say is that though this was a family reunion, there were also friends of the family invited there. I want to be really clear about that because there was an individual there that I thought, oh, she's kind of cute. I kind of like this person. Not one of my cousins. This is not an Arrested Development type of situation here. So I was, a little concerned about impressing her, and I wanted to impress my aunts and uncles because I loved them so much, and I was frustrated that I couldn't be on the grown-ups team. So I was taking this family kickball game very seriously. About halfway through the game, one of my uncles said, "Hey, we're changing the rules. You have to kick with your off foot." Now, I'm not a soccer player. I'm a wannabe athlete. So kicking with my right foot, is a challenge enough. But to change the rules and say now I have to kick with my left foot, that was going to be a bit of a challenge. But okay, everybody's doing it. So the grown-ups had their turn, and it was hilarious, and it was fun. And then the kids' team, my team, went up. And I was the first one up to kick. So my uncle pitches the ball towards me, and I run and try to kick with my off foot, and strike one. Ha 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 ha. Oh, that's funny. Okay, this is goofy. No big deal. Going back up. All right, here comes the pitch. Strike two. Now I'm a little bit stressed out because I've got two strikes. I've never met anybody who struck out in kickball before. Here's this, possible romantic interest watching the game. I'm frustrated I'm on the kids' team, and I'm trying to impress my aunts and uncles. So I'm freaking out a little bit on the inside. Here comes the pitch. Strike three, Matt's out. Now, in this moment, I felt so much embarrassment and so much humiliation and so much anger and frustration, everything that I'd been feeling about why do I have to be on the kids' team and all of the pressure I'd felt to impress everybody, and this girl was standing there without even thinking. I picked up, there was this broken piece of concrete where the parking lot met the beach, and I just picked up this piece of concrete and I just hurled it towards the water. Without even really looking or paying attention to what I was doing. And as soon as I let this piece of concrete about the size of a softball go, I realized that where this piece of concrete was heading was towards this beautiful family of ducks that was walking along the beach. And it was like, I literally remember feeling like wishing I could just grab it and bring it back in, and I couldn't. And my whole family had stopped laughing at me from striking out in kickball and was stopped and was watching this piece of concrete fly through the air towards the beach. And we saw this group of ducks, quack, 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 fly in the air and fly away. And then we saw one duck doing something like this in a circle and just wah, 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 really loud and doing this funny little dance, okay? I'm going to stop the story there. I'm not going to tell you how the rest of that story went. But what I want to ask is why on earth, in that situation, would I make such a terrible decision to hurl a piece of concrete towards the water without realizing what I was even throwing it at? Why on earth was I so frustrated that I struck out in kickball, aside from the fact that I had struck out in kickball? Why did that bother me so much? It's because I was 13 years old, and I knew I didn't belong with the kids. And I knew I didn't belong with the adults. And I was trying to figure out how I belonged with this girl. And I was trying to impress my family that I looked up to and cared about so much. I was trying to find my place. I was trying to figure out which group I belonged with. I was trying to figure out how I fit in. And if you take such a foolish story of being crushed under the pressure of a family kickball game, and then doing something terrible that made, this beautiful animal do this funny little dance on the beach. The thing that was driving all of that was this question I was asking. What is my place? Where do I belong? How do I fit in? If I go back and look at my life, the successes, the failures, the times where emotions were running so strong, all of the sorrow, all of the joy, and I trace those experiences back, I don't have to go too far before it leads to this question. What is my place? How do I fit in? Where do I belong? It's why when we're at our lockers at school, and we see this group over there by their lockers and this group over there by their lockers, we wonder, which group do I go to? How do I get their attention? Or when we're at the water cooler at work and we see that group congregating by those cubicles and that group congregating by those cubicles, we wonder, which group do I go to? Where do I fit in? How do I get their attention? It's why we often tell jokes that we would never tell in any other situations, because we're trying to get people's attention by showing that we have a sense of humor. It's why we ask for certain clothes for Christmas. It's because we want to fit in with a certain group. We're trying to figure out what our place is at school, and we want to fit in with them. It's why we choose certain careers or certain schools. It's because we're trying to figure out our place in the world. This question isn't just a 13-year-old question. It's a question that a preschooler or an empty nester and everyone in between is asking. It's the question behind so much of how we think and feel in all that we do. It's us trying to find our place in the world. All of us are on a lifelong quest to answer this question. Now, as Kyle Lake mentioned last week, the Apostle Paul writes this letter to the church in Corinth. And this is a group of fired up followers of Jesus. These are people who are taking their faith really seriously, and they're trying to figure out what to do with the gifts that each of them have. They're trying to figure out who's in and who's out, and what does it mean to be a part of this thing, and are these people more important than these people, or what do we do with people who think this, and what do we do with people who act that way? How do we make all of this fit together? How do we make all of this work? And Paul says this in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 27. Now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. Now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. We won't look at the whole passage this morning, but if you read the verses leading up to this passage, Paul essentially says, hey, God is putting this body together, and it's actually Jesus' body. But if you follow Jesus, if you're a Christian, each one of you is a part of that body. You're an eye, you're a hand, you're a foot, you're a mouth, and each part matters. If you have trouble with this metaphor, this image always helps me when I'm trying to understand how this works. God is putting together the most massive and big and beautiful and creative Mr. Potato Head doll we could possibly imagine. And each one of us is a part of that body. Each hand matters. You're a hand and you matter. You're an eye and you matter. You're a mouth and you matter. You're a foot and you matter. If you're a foot, you shouldn't try and be a hand, because Jesus, the Mr. Potato Head doll, needs a foot. He doesn't need any more hands. You are one of these parts, and you matter. Each part matters. Each part is unique. And the hand can't say to the foot, I matter more than you. And if the eye is suffering, the mouth can't say, well, I feel just fine. No, the mouth suffers too. If you follow Jesus, if you're a Christian, then you are a part of this body. You belong. You're a part of it. If every human being is wrestling with this question of what is my place? How do I fit in? How do I belong? Who are my people? Paul says the church has an answer to that question. You're a part of a body. God's building a body and you're a part of it. Whether you want to be or not, you're a part of this thing and you're unique and you matter. You belong here. For all of us, no matter what age we are or what stage of life we're in, as we try to fit in at school, on our teams, with our friends, in our families, and at work, no matter what all of those different groups look like in our life, we can't forget what Paul says, that you're a part of a body and you belong here. No matter where else you belong or don't belong, you belong here. And it doesn't matter where you've been or what you've done or what's been done to you or how long you've been away or whether you're young or old or what you believe or don't believe or how you identify yourself or don't identify yourself, you belong here. The church needs you. You are a part of this place. Mars Hill is not Mars Hill without you. And you aren't you without recognizing that you are a part of this body that God is building. The first time I met Ed Dobson, I was 19 years old, and it was September 15th, 2001. I was away at school in Chicago, my second year of college, and after the September 11th attacks, classes were canceled and things were shut down in town, and everyone was trying to figure out what was going on, so I came home for the weekend. My parents came and picked me up, and I had heard that my friend Michael, who was here just a few weeks ago preaching, Michael Hidalgo, he and Ed Dobson were going to just be taking questions from the congregation at Calvary Church on Saturday night about how do we feel about this? How do we think about this? What does this mean as a follower of Jesus that this terrible thing has happened? So I went. And after the service, I was talking to Michael, and Ed was walking by, and Michael grabbed him and said, hey, Ed, I want you to meet my friend Matt. So I shook his hand and said, hi, I'm Matt. And he said, hi, I'm Ed. Nice to meet you. And Ed kept going. I went back to school, and 7 months later, I came home for spring break. And I was in the midst of, I had all these questions, the questions we have in all stages of life about, I don't know what it means to follow Jesus. I don't know if I believe in God. I don't know how all of this works. And I was feeling depressed and discouraged about it. And for some reason, on that Saturday night, it was actually the night before Easter, I said, all right, I'll go to church. And I drove to Calvary Church for their Saturday night service. And the weather was really bad because when you go home for spring break and you live in Michigan, there's snow. That's how you celebrate spring break, is a snowstorm. So I drove across town, and I had left early. I drove from Grandville to the Beltline. And I got there really early because I had left early not knowing how bad the roads were going to be. And there were probably only 10 people in a room about this size. And I walked in and I sat in the very back row. And I sat there thinking, I don't really even know what I'm doing here because I've got all these questions and I'm not really feeling great about it. And about 20 minutes before the service was supposed to start, Ed came out from in back and went on stage and he put his notes down and he was like arranging some things. And he looked up and he saw me sitting in the back row. And he walked down the stairs and walked down the aisle, and he came up to me and he said, "You're Matt, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm Matt." And he said, "Dude, how you doing?" And we had this conversation. A man that preached to thousands of people on a weekly basis and met countless new people every week, saw me from across the room, remembered my name 7 months later, and made a point to come say my name and ask me how I was doing. And in that moment, no matter what I was feeling and how all these questions that I had, I knew that I belonged. Ed had made a space for me in that moment. I felt safe and I felt known. If you've been impacted by the life and ministry of Ed Dobson, and I would say if you're sitting in a gray chair this morning, then you have been. One of the ways we carry on the legacy of his work is we make sure Mars Hill continues to be the kind of place where we look at everybody, people of all ages and from all different groups, and say, "You belong here." And we continue to make Mars Hill the kind of place where people are known by name. And we have the courage to walk across the room and say, "Hey, you're Matt, right? Dude, how you doing?" Jesus didn't say, "Hey, short guy, I'm going to come over to your house for dinner tonight." He looked across the crowd and he said, "Zacchaeus, I'm going to come over to your house today." He knew his name. He called him by name. And Zacchaeus found belonging. So I want to invite the band to come up in just a second. And here's what we're going to do. We have all written our names on these popsicle sticks that Troy so helpfully prepared for us for this morning. Before we start singing, the invitation is for each one of you to come up, reach your hand in the bucket, and pull out one of those popsicle sticks. And turn around, because the person who wrote on that popsicle stick is in the section or near the section where you find it in that bucket. And then your invitation is to go and find that person. Are you Joe? 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 You're Joe. Hi, Joe. I'm Matt. You belong here. So pick a name, read that name, find that person, and tell them, "You belong here."